Sir, you're scaring the families here, and I need you to leave immediately. The park ranger announces loudly as 79-year-old Thomas Bear McKeenan sits quietly on a bench feeding pigeons. His weathered face, missing left eye, and torn clothes draw stares from parents pulling their children closer, unaware that the Congressional Medal of Honor hangs beneath his ragged coat. What happens when a 7-year-old girl recognizes what the adults missed will bring tears to your eyes and change how you see homeless veterans forever. If this story touches your heart, hit subscribe and share a moment when someone surprised you with their hidden story. Every person has worth. Thomas McKeenan had been coming to Riverside Park for 3 weeks, always sitting on the same bench near the duck pond. At 79, Bear didn't have many places where he felt welcome anymore. His left eye socket, scarred and empty from an explosion in Vietnam, made people uncomfortable. His clothes, donated from various shelters, were clean but old and patched. His gray beard was long and unkempt because he couldn't afford regular haircuts to most people walking by. He looked like every other homeless veteran they'd learned to ignore. Bear came to the park because it reminded him of better times. Before the war, before the nightmares, before his wife left him and his kids stopped calling. Here, watching families play and children laugh, he could remember what normal felt like. He always brought a small bag of breadcrumbs for the pigeons. They didn't care what he looked like or judge him for his circumstances. They just appreciated the food. On this particular Tuesday morning, Bear was enjoying the peaceful routine when Park Ranger Janet Mills approached his bench. "Sir, I've had several complaints about you," she said in an official tone that carried across the playground area. Bear looked up, confused. "Complaints about what, ma'am?" "Parents are saying you're making them uncomfortable. Some mothers don't want to bring their children here while you're around." A small crowd was forming nearby. A jogger had stopped to listen. 2 mothers pushing strollers slowed their walk to see what was happening. "I'm just feeding the birds," Bear said quietly. "I'm not bothering anyone." Ranger Mills crossed her arms. "Look, I understand you probably don't have anywhere else to go, but this is a family park. Your appearance is unsettling to some people." Bear felt the familiar sting of judgment. It was the same look he'd gotten from store clerks, restaurant workers, and countless strangers over the years. "What exactly am I doing wrong?" Bear asked, trying to keep his voice calm. The ranger gestured toward his appearance. "Sir, you look intimidating. That eye injury, your clothes, the way you just sit here staring at the children. People are concerned." More onlookers gathered. A businessman eating lunch on a nearby bench looked disgusted. A teenage couple whispered to each other while pointing in Bear's direction. "I'm a veteran," Bear said simply. "I served my country." Ranger Mills rolled her eyes. "Look, I've heard that story 100 times. Every homeless guy claims to be a veteran. Whether that's true or not, you still can't loiter here indefinitely." Bear's hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the effort it took to stay respectful. "Ma'am, I'm not loitering. This is a public park. I have as much right to be here as anyone else." "Actually, you don't," the ranger replied sharply. "I have the authority to remove people who are disrupting the peace or making other visitors uncomfortable." Businessman nodded approvingly. Finally, someone doing something about these people. A mother with twin toddlers pulled her children farther away, as if Bear might suddenly become dangerous. Bear started to stand, ready to leave rather than cause more of a scene. He'd been thrown out of places before. It always hurt, but he'd learned not to fight it. That's when a small voice piped up from behind the growing crowd. "Mommy, why is everyone being mean to the soldier?" A 7-year-old girl with pigtails and a bright red backpack pushed through the adults, ignoring her mother's attempts to pull her back. "Sweetie, come away from there," her mother said nervously. But the girl was staring at Bear with curious, unafraid eyes. She was young enough not to see him as scary or different. She just saw an old man sitting alone, "Are you really a soldier?" she asked Bear directly. Bear's weathered face softened. "I was, little miss." A long time ago, the girl noticed something glinting beneath Bear's torn jacket. "What's that shiny thing?" Before Bear could answer, the girl stepped closer and pointed. "It's a medal, a really pretty one." The ranger moved to intercept the child. "Honey, you need to step back." But the girl was already examining the medal more closely. "My grandpa has medals too. He was in a war. Is that what yours is for?" Bear nodded, touched by her innocence. "Yes, sweetheart. I got this in Vietnam." The girl turned to address the crowd of adults, her young voice carrying clearly across the park. "This man is a hero. He has a medal just like my grandpa." An elderly man who had been walking his dog stopped and squinted at Bear's chest. He stepped closer, his expression changing dramatically. "Son of a gun," the old man whispered. Is that a Medal of Honor?" The crowd suddenly went quiet. The businesswoman stopped mid-complaint. The jogging woman paused her workout. Even Ranger Mills looked uncertain. Bear instinctively tried to cover the medal, but the old man was already beside him. "I'm Harold Peterson, retired Air Force colonel. May I have a closer look, sir?" Bear hesitated, then slowly opened his jacket. The Medal of Honor caught the sunlight, its distinctive star and ribbon unmistakable to anyone who knew military decorations. Colonel Peterson's voice filled with respect and awe. "Ladies and gentlemen, this man is wearing the Congressional Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration in the United States. Only 3,500 people in our entire history have ever received this honor." The crowd's attitude shifted completely. The businessman looked ashamed. The mothers stopped pulling their children away. Even the teenage couple seemed suddenly interested. The little girl clapped her hands. "I told you he was a hero." Ranger Mills looked like she wanted to disappear. "Sir, I had no idea." Colonel Peterson turned to address everyone within earshot. "The Medal of Honor is awarded only for acts of valor above and beyond the call of duty. This man risked his life to save others. He's not just a veteran. He's one of America's greatest heroes." Bear felt uncomfortable with the sudden attention. "It's just a medal," he said quietly. "No, sir, it's not," Peterson replied firmly. "Would you mind telling us what you did to earn it?" Bear was silent for a long moment. He'd spent years trying to forget Vietnam, not relive it for strangers. The little girl took his hand encouragingly. "Please tell us. I want to hear about how you were brave." Bear looked at her innocent face and felt something shift inside him. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. "I was a medic," he began slowly. "Charlie Company, 1st Infantry Division. In 1969 our unit was ambushed in the Mekong Delta. We had 23 wounded men pinned down by enemy fire." The crowd pressed closer, hanging on every word. Bear continued. "The helicopters couldn't land because of the gunfire. So I went out to get our boys. Made 7 trips across that field under heavy fire, carrying wounded soldiers to safety one at a time." Colonel Peterson nodded with deep respect. "How many men did you save?" "All of them," Bear said simply. 23 soldiers made it home to their families. The little girl's eyes were wide with amazement. "You saved 23 people?" Bear knelt down to her level. "That was my job, sweetheart. When people are hurt and scared, you help them. Doesn't matter if it's dangerous." Ranger Mills stepped forward, her face red with embarrassment. "Mr. McKinnon, I owe you a profound apology. I had no right to judge you or ask you to leave." Bear stood slowly, his arthritis making movement difficult. "Ma'am, you were just doing your job. People complain, you respond." "I understand that, but Colonel Peterson wasn't letting it go so easily." He turned to the crowd. "This man is living proof that heroism comes in all forms. 50 years ago, he saved 23 American soldiers. Today, we almost threw him out of a public park for looking different." The businessman approached Bear with shame in his eyes. Sir, I was one of the people who complained. I am deeply sorry. A mother with young children stepped forward. I pulled my kids away from you. I should have been teaching them to respect veterans like you instead. More apologies came from around. The crowd, people who had been staring with suspicion and fear, now looked at Bear with admiration and regret. The little girl tugged on Bear's sleeve. Are you sad that people were mean to you? Bear smiled at her. Not anymore, sweetheart. Sometimes, people need time to see past the outside to what's on the inside. Colonel Peterson pulled out his wallet. Mr. McKinnon, I'd like to buy you lunch. There's a diner across the street where everyone should know your story. Before Bear could protest, the businessman stepped up. I'd like to contribute too, and I know some people who can help with housing. The mother with twins approached. I volunteer at the VA. I can help connect you with services you might not know about. Soon, half the crowd was offering help, phone numbers, resources, and friendship. The offer that touched Bear most came from the little girl. Would you like to come to dinner at my house? My grandpa would love to meet another hero. Bear's eyes filled with tears. He'd gone from being unwanted and judged to being invited into someone's family, all because one child saw past his appearance to his true worth. 3 months later, Bear had his own small apartment, courtesy of a veterans housing program. He volunteered at the local elementary school, sharing his story with children who saw him as he truly was, a hero. The little girl, Emma Chun, became his adopted granddaughter. Her family included him in holidays and celebrations, giving him the family connection he'd lost years earlier. Ranger Mills arranged for Bear to have a permanent bench in the park with a small plaque reading, "In honor of Congressional Medal of Honor recipient Thomas Bear McKinnon, who reminds us that heroes walk among us every day." Bear still fed the pigeons there every morning. But now, children would run up to hear stories about his medal. Parents would shake his hand and thank him for his service. Other veterans found him there, sharing their own struggles and finding comfort in his understanding. One day, Emma asked him a question that stayed with him forever. "Mr. Bear, why do you think grown-ups sometimes can't see what kids can see?" Bear thought carefully before answering. "Sometimes, sweetheart, grown-ups forget that every person has a story. Kids like you remember to look for the good in people first." Emma nodded seriously. "I'm going to keep looking for the good in everyone." Bear hugged her tight. "That's the most important thing you'll ever do." As Bear sat on his bench that evening, watching families play in the park that had once rejected him, he reflected on how one small girl's courage to see past appearances had changed everything. The Medal of Honor around his neck represented 23 lives he'd saved in Vietnam. But Emma's kindness had saved something too: his faith in humanity and his place in the community he'd served so long ago. Sometimes, Bear realized, the smallest acts of recognition and kindness can be just as powerful as any medal.